Morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Productivity Mastery, the show that's bringing you some of the most accomplished leaders, inspiring consultants, speakers, people from all walks of life sharing practical information, inspiring tools of how to make your business and your life better. And I'm super excited to bringing today somebody I had a chance to meet in Graz this year. We immediately hit it off. Actually, we met at the airport. Where was
Airport.
it?
We
Where
were
was
at the
it?
gate about to board the plane, and I saw you, and I was like, I think that's my panel host. And so I went over and said hi.
What was the airport? Was that
Munich.
Was that Munich or Vienna?
It,
Munich. I
it
think it
was
was Munich.
Munich. Yeah.
It's like, why is this woman approaching me? What's going on? Uh, yeah, so we actually met there and we had a great time at a stage. I had the pleasure to host a panel on the future of work,
Mm,
and Nina was one of the panelists. But then I joined her keynote, and I was like, I need to have this lady on the podcast because what she's sharing is so useful, so well structured, and her keynote was one of my favorite keynotes. Really,
thank
really,
you.
really great job, Nina. To those of you who are tuning in right now, okay, Nina is global program director of Butchershop Europe, and she'll tell us what that is. She has some experience in Germany. She has some experience in San Francisco. She's been many years in the creative sector. She's also a mentor at a number of organizations, including the Female Factor, Black Girls Code, Female Founders. She's spoken at San Francisco Design Week, 15 Seconds, Vienna Up, and many more occasions. She's constantly working with some of the leading brands, helping them to grow. And today we're going to talk about failure. Nina, how are you today
Let's do
in this
it.
beautiful morning?
Hi, good morning. I'm great. I'm really excited to be here. And when you invited me to one of your podcasts, I already, when I met you at 15 seconds, I knew I wanted to hope that you'd have a good impression so I could come to the podcast because I just think you bring such an awesome energy and you're talking about really fun topics. So I'm really excited to be here. I have my coffee. We just had a conversation about morning people. And cheers, cheers.
And for those of you who are curious, Nina is scoring herself 4 out of 10 at the Morning People scoreboard. As opposed to me, who's
Yep.
an 8. So, Nina, except of not being definitely a morning person, um, could you give me a little bit of an idea, just the brief version of your story? Right now, you're in Germany, but
Yeah.
how did you end up in Butcher Shop? And
Yeah.
actually, how did you end up in Germany?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I think I've really cracked sort of the code for myself of just being an international person who travels and works in many countries, which I never thought would be the case. So I'm born and raised in San Jose, California, so from Silicon Valley. My mother is German, born and raised. My father's from Greece. So I was raised with very heavy European culture, but in the heart of Silicon Valley, in the heart of tech and innovation. So I sort of had this very interesting clash of cultures and the way I was raised. And I actually kicked off my career in Germany. I started in product marketing at CV Couleur here in northern Germany in Oldenburg, which is Europe's largest photo printing company. That was actually my first job was in Germany after I graduated college in the United States. I always felt very close tie to Europe and wanted to understand international business better and sort of use something that was unique to me as a young person. When you're in your early 20s trying to figure out your footing and what makes you unique and what makes you different, you want to try to find what that is and latch onto it. And that was something that I did. So I started my first job in Europe. The day I graduated college, I moved to Germany, which my parents were not thrilled about. And I had an amazing experience there. After 4 years, I moved back to San Francisco. I really wanted to have the city life. I wanted to go back to Silicon Valley. Loads of exciting things were happening over there with Netflix and Apple and the birth of social media. And I wanted to sort of go back to that spot. And so I entered the agency space first in the digital agency space. So I was working for an agency called ROI DNA, where we were working with Virgin America, GitHub, Dropbox, and we're doing their digital marketing presence, SEO, SEM. And so that's when I sort of got my footing in this agency world where you don't do in-house, you're working with lots of different clients, right? Which is a completely different pace. I always like to say working at an agency is like training in high altitude because you don't have, one job, you have like 6 jobs. But being young and hungry and in San Francisco, I really loved it. I found my way to Butchershop, which at the time we were a branding agency, very heavy in the strategic and creative space, helping companies evolve, grow, launch products. And that's really where I got my footing. I started there in sort of project management, account management. They actually brought me on because they had a big German client, Haufe, and they needed a senior person who spoke German. So I sort of was able to bring that unique piece back into a value add for me to be hired there. And ever since, it's just been a sort of a rocket ship experience there. I was on the operations side. I managed all of our company resources, operations, project management team. And then I, of course, moved back to Europe because I just get too bored clearly in one spot. And we decided we wanted to open our shop in Europe, and we wanted to see what we can do here. It was during the pandemic, so I can sort of get into all that. But over the last 2 years, we've grown a lot. So Butchershop is a growth and transformation company who helps companies emerge into markets. So they break in and out of emerging markets at really important inflection points of their business. Maybe they're looking to raise funding. Maybe they're in a merge and acquisition situation. Maybe they're a legacy company who really needs to reposition themselves to maintain relevance in their market. Maybe it's a US company coming to Europe. So that's really where Butchershop's focus is. And I am now responsible for building the European presence here, doing a lot of the business development, brand awareness, finding partners. I have a sort of roll up your sleeves kind of job where I get to be a little bit a part of everything. I get to speak English. I get to speak German. I go to Vienna. I fly to the US. It's just this crazy job that I absolutely love. And yeah, I think that, the topic of failure is weaved throughout that entire story and introduction. And I can sort of get into that a lot more, which we will in this podcast. But Butchershop is sort of the first place where I became introduced to the failure topic and using it as a tool and a method versus a hurdle or a challenge.
And we'll definitely get into the topic of failure in just a sec. I just want to give a shout out. There's people tuning in right now, and those of you who are watching us live right now, we would invite you all to, first of all, drop us a line and let us know where you're watching us from. Navid is saying hello from Austria. Somebody who's also been on 15 seconds. Navid, great to see you. He's saying greeting from Austria to both of you. So let us know where you're watching us from. And of course, if you have any questions to Nina, drop a line and we'll take some questions. But Nina, let's get into it. Failure. And reading the title, Using Failure as a Tool for Growth, which I proudly came up with and you accepted. But then I was thinking, in some ways, in the recent years, this whole topic of failure became a little bit fluffy in my perspective. Mm-hmm. Now it's all about fail fast, go there, you gotta fail. And in a way, you kind of lost the meaning a little bit. So I just want to hear more about your perspective on this. And I know you have a special perspective on the fail fast sort of concept. What do you think about it? And why did you decide we need to develop methodology to use failure as a tool for growth?
Yeah. Just like you said, coming from the Silicon Valley, we're sort of raised in this mentality of speed and hustle and fail as often as you can, just keep getting up type of way. Even just the way VCs fund startups, right? You only have to have sometimes a proof of concept, and you can get insane amount of funding where there hasn't really been a plan or a process or things in place, and the failure rates tend to skyrocket, right? 90% of startups fail at some point. And being in a space coming from the agency side where we very often, we have a front row seat to what's going on behind the scenes at a lot of these companies, at startups, at Fortune 500s, right, at mid-level companies. And one of the things that we really noticed was there's this conversation around success that is misplaced. Every time a customer or a client is coming to us, we're always talking about, okay, what's going to cause, or what does success look like? What do we need to do to achieve success, right? In order for us to partner together, we need these 3 things from you. In order for us to hit this revenue, we need to do these 3 things. So over the years, Butchershop's been around for 15 years. Over the years, we really just noticed the list of successes of what people are constantly after is incredibly short, right? It's hitting a certain target revenue. It's hitting a certain traffic on your website. It's increasing users or acquiring users. And the list was always very short, and it felt flawed to therefore come up with a plan, a budget, a process, a team, resourcing, operations, all to just hit these short list of successes, because there's lots of unknowns and gaps and a lack of clarity along the way. And so we started putting a focus on, okay, how can we get as clear as possible? How can we reduce the amount of unknowns in the path to success? And we started flipping the conversation of success on its head. And we said, okay, we need to know what all the tripwires are to get to that success point, which led to what are the failure points, right? And if you talk about, okay, what does failure look like for my company or for my initiative? The list of what's going to cause you to fail is super long if you take your time out and you write it out. It can be up to 100 things, right? Where that success list was really, really short. So we were like, why don't we start with the list of failures first? Let's prioritize them, because prioritizing, focusing on too many things is like focusing on nothing. You have to be able to prioritize and generate clarity around those priorities. And then we can build solutions to prevent those failures from happening in order to be successful. So we really just flip it on its head, take a completely different approach. And it's not just a method or it's something that's fluffy, right? People are getting a little bit sick of this failure conversation because the world is in disarray right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people are going through different type of failures. It's a scary time, and nobody wants to hear, just keep trying, right? People want a tool. And so we started using this years ago at Butchershop internally for our project work. So when we had a new client, these were very high budgeted projects, high profile clients. The level of risk and the need for success was so important. There was a spotlight on it. We started doing internally, okay, what's going to cause this project to fail, right? So we would first say that we would answer that question as our team. We would go through and we would rank those failure items by the likelihood and the impact of those failure topics and multiplying those numbers together, which we can go into in detail more. I'm more than happy to do that, of sort of the details on how to do that. But we would get a list of top ranked failures. And then we would talk about who's responsible for preventing that failure. There's one person who had to be assigned accountability to prevent that failure from happening. We would focus on the top 5 failures. And that became such a staple part of our process in really making sure we were setting up the project for success, that we eventually were like, this is such a trust building exercise. Why don't we do this? Why don't we open this up? Why are we doing this just for us? It is not constructive for us to sit in a room by ourselves and talk about all the things that we're worried about. We need to bring our partners, our customers, whoever we're working with on this together so that we can build trust, accountability, and clarity on those failure items. And one of the things we found, which was probably one of the most impactful things, was when you bring in people into those conversations, the level of hierarchy of people in the room tends to melt away. The whole point is that you want to have everybody's voice heard. You want to come to the table. It's just as important to hear what the junior strategist's concern is versus the VP's concern, because they're different. One of them might be a little bit more focused and in the weeds, and the other one's going to be a higher success point. So by getting all those failures on the table and having a constructive conversation on how to prevent them from happening, you're going to get the things that you need to focus on, and you're going to decrease that chance of failure by a lot. And
it reminds me of the Pixar brain trusts. If you have read the book of Ed Catmull, Creativity Inc., where they
no.
started doing these brain trusts,
Mhm.
where usually it will be the executives making decisions around what movie should be launched, which parts of the story we should cut out because this is too expensive, and so on and so forth. So he wanted to create a safe culture where everybody has a voice, and specifically people who have something to do with creativity that can contribute to making a great story, they'll be the ones in the room. And I think what I'm hearing from you is probably similar, is you kind of remove the hierarchy. Like everybody has an equal voice to point out what are the potential failures, which should be something that, often people at the top, they cannot see some of the potential failures, but you create a space for this to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most important differentiators of this beat failure method, as we call it at Butchershop, is that we want to remove subjectivity from the conversation. That's really, really important, because everyone's coming in with their perspectives, and very often subjective opinions create gray areas, they create confusion. We want to always be objective. We want to create objective points of orientation on how to prevent those failures from happening. So that's where the scoring part comes into the methodology, which stems from the pre-mortem or the post-mortem. I think a lot of people know what the post-mortem is. Our beat failure method at Butchershop, the core is the pre-mortem methodology, and that core is the scoring piece. So what you do is you take your failure points. Let's say you've come in a group, you have all your failure points down, and you have 40 failure points. You're going to go through each one and you're going to rank them collectively as a group on two things. The first one is, what's the likelihood of this failure point to happen? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, and then you multiply that on what is the impact if this were to happen on a scale of 1 to 10. So for example, if one of the failure points is, we don't know our audience, which is one of the most common failure points I think I've heard in my entire career, is we don't know our audience. Do we really know them? You're having a conversation of the current landscape by scoring the likelihood on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very likely. How well do we know our audience? And now you're having a conversation around the likelihood. So let's say that scores at like a 5. People are like, well, we've done a lot of research. We have strategy. We're still figuring some things out. There's still some user testing happening. We don't know 100%, but we feel okay. Great. Let's score in the middle, 5. Now let's go to the next score, which is, okay, well, what is the impact on our entire initiative if we don't know our audience? Well, that's going to be a 10. That's catastrophic. We don't know who we're talking to. We don't know what we're messaging. We don't know who we're marketing to. So that's going to score a 50. The highest score is 100, right? So 50 is still a really good score, but if you have 5 or 6 things that score above a 50, then those are the things you need to be focusing on, because that score of 50 of figuring out what your audience is already in play. And so we're giving objectivity through the ranking system to these subjective topics. Does that make sense?
And it's actually quite interesting that you said this is such a common topic, and then you rated it as a 10. So if one thing people can get out of this podcast already is like, maybe you want to go get to know your audience a little better.
Yeah.
But also follow the methodology. And before we continue, I just want to give shout out to, we have Kanishka joining us from India. Kanishka, hello. Thank you for being with us. And obviously, if you have any questions, anything you would like to have clarified, make sure to post another comment. But we continue on with the methodology. Okay, so you do these. How many failure points you mentioned 40, for example? Like, is that everything you come up with? Do you have like a specific? And also, what is the do you define a specific period? Well, what's the usual period you advise companies to look into?
Yeah, good question. So it's really valuable to do at moments of kicking off something. So it's really great when you are coming together with a new team. You have a new initiative. There's some things that are still being figured out. It's a great way to define the unknowns. But this is something that provides a lot of clarity in lots of different moments where you see different types of signals come in. If you have, like I just said, someone new, if you're dealing with some challenges in a project, if there's a little bit of chaos going on and you just need a moment to level set, this method is the perfect moment to do that. You can get through it with 5 people within an hour, right? You can even be quicker if you want to. But the whole purpose of it is we're also in so many meetings. We have no time on our hands anymore. Usually people are like eye rolling if there's one more meeting on your calendar. So the purpose of this is to make it really short, to have a low time investment, high impact, high value on what you're doing. So just like I stated, it's very, very valuable to do in the beginning of projects. We like to do them also in the middle of projects as well. If there's a handoff from a team to another team, or if there's sort of a new phase or a new initiative kicking off, this is really one of the pieces that's going to help identify any unknowns, maximize clarity, assign accountability, and just keep tabs on those things. And the failure points that you have from, let's say, your first session that was, let's say, 2 months ago, if you check back on those top failure points should now be gone, or should move, technically, if you were to rescore them, they would move lower to the list, right? You want to show progress that those are being focused on. So some new ones on the list might actually go up in scoring. So it is really important practice to go back and look at those failure points and say, is there any progress on these? Are the scores changing? And hopefully the scores are going down, meaning new ones are going to have scores that are going up, and you can continue focusing on whatever you need to be doing in order to be successful at your campaign or your product launch or your next round of funding. This is really agnostic for whatever industry, whatever company you have. There isn't a specific type of profile for people to be using this method. It is for everyone. People do it personally. I know people who've done it for when they had children. What's going to make me or what's going to cause me as a dad to fail? People have done this for personal things as well. It doesn't always have to be connected to business. It's also a really good practice for personal growth and development as well.
Mm-hmm. And so you identify the failure points, you rate them. Now maybe you create a plan around it. Like, how do we address them from the ones that with the highest scores? I wonder, how does that change the way we do strategy? As you already said, like usually people sit together, they define the goals, the strategy. Not many maybe look into the failure points, but now that they do, is that the goal setting of the company, or they should be incorporated in the next strategy session? How would you look at that?
Well, basically what you're doing with these failure items is you're creating actionable plans for the top ranked things. So they turn into task-based action items. So what you want to do is, if your top ranked item is we don't know our audience, then you're going to want to come up with a solution brainstorm on how to prevent that from happening. So maybe your head of strategy or whoever's focused on strategy needs to now crank up on user testing, on stakeholder interviews, on quantitative and qualitative surveys, right? So now that's a new task and action item in order to make sure that we do know who our audience is, right? Another one could be we're unclear of roles and responsibilities. Another common one, which you'd think is one that wouldn't rank so high, but very often with a large team, the roles and responsibilities are very confusing, right? And there's people who have multiple ownerships and they don't know who's assigned to what. Very often there's a owner of something, there's an informed person on something, there's a sponsor of something, right? It's never as straightforward as you're responsible for this one thing. So that's also a very common top ranked item that we see is there's a lack of role and responsibility. Okay, well, who's responsible then to help avoid that from happening? Let's create an action item and a plan on defining that. So all those failure points turn into key action items to build next steps. And then they turn into tasks and you can check them off.
I'm gonna just pause for a second because this is an area I'm also really passionate about. Actually, one of the letters from the acronym PERFORM, which is the core of our methodologies, R for roles and responsibilities. And the methodology of PERFORM is just about how do we create a culture that is both productive and creating a caring environment in an organization. So one of the letters is R for roles and responsibilities. Initially, we had no idea that it's going to be so big. It was like, okay, we need an R. What could be it? All the other letters make so much sense. Okay, let's put the roles and responsibilities, even though people know it, right?
Yeah,
that was
but
the
it's
assumption.
so important.
Then you talk to people, you go to talk to companies, and they're like, this is the one we pay less attention to from all the rest of them. Because it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you probably know it. Oh, he's the head of marketing. She's this. They should know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But what you said as well, and I just want to hear what are the kind of tools that you use? Because I mean, you mentioned something that's similar to the RACI tool, but there's many of those tools. But this one is a little different. So you said owner. Can you maybe tell me what's that kind of tool that you use?
It's like my own version of RACI. Because you adapt it to whatever you feel like is needed, right? So there's always an owner, right? So that person is ultimately responsible for the overarching task or action item or initiative or whichever. And then there's an informed person. That person usually needs to sort of know what's going on. They need to be kept in the loop. They need to be CC'd. Maybe they're the person that informed person is reporting to, or maybe the owner is reporting to. Or the informed person has a partial ownership to it, right? There tends to be a lot of gray areas. So we have our owner, we have an informed, and then we have a sponsor. And I don't know if this is unique to Butchershop, but very often a lot of the things that we're creating or building, and we have a culture where we move really fast, and also our internal initiatives move really fast. We have lots of different ones that are really important to the Butchershop brand. Well, there might need to be one person. Very often, this is our CEO or our COO. They're the sponsor of the yay or nay. Is this a go? Is it not? Do they have one piece of feedback they really want to sort of add to it to make sure it's correct? So we added the sponsor role to that as a sort of a safety net to make sure that all areas of this task or initiative are covered, right? Somebody knows what's going on, somebody's owning it, and someone's probably the final approver or naysayer on that. But again, that's unique to us, and it works for us very well. And I think there's other people at Butchershop who use RACI as well.
And by the way,
I like
RACI,
to keep it simple.
I love the RACI, but I think it confuses people a little bit. The first two letters, those of you who haven't heard about RACI, it's a great tool. We even have it in the book, but they're responsible and accountable. And for many people, especially not native speakers, they kind of feel the word means the same, which it doesn't, but it kind of does, right? So accountable is the sort of the owner from your methodology, which is like the last person in command, decision maker. They need to make sure that the project is delivered, or they communicate that there's difficulties. Responsible is the person who's doing the stuff. I think it's more of a doer, right? Like it's, it could be a project manager that's accountable, and then there's people that are
to me that's the owner, right? But it depends on the terminology and sort of the phonetics of how your company or how your team speaks to one another. Like you just said, RACI might not be right for everyone because they're going to interpret it differently. So you have to also understand, like, we need to be speaking the same language. So that's just how we do it. And also mine only has 3 where RACI has 4, and I like to simplify things. I want things to be simple and less confusing.
Whatever tool you hear, I mean, you guys are hearing this fantastic tool for failure setting, right? maybe you gotta adapt it to whatever works for you. Maybe the race is gonna work for you because you understand it well, or you have to adapt the words. What's important is that you choose a system, you choose a method, you make sure everybody's clear what that is, and if they buy into it, then you use it consistently.
Yeah.
So I think people always like, what is the best method? What is the magic pill? It's like there's no magic pill.
Mm, yeah.
Like building a great company, building a great culture is about doing consistently the things that need to get done
Yeah.
and making sure everybody's on the same page. As one of the guests on my podcast, who's a director of photography in Hollywood, Shane Herbert. Great episode, guys. You gotta go watch it. But he said on the show, one of my challenges, biggest challenges as a leader, is making sure that everybody on my team is making the same movie,
Mm,
right? Because there's
yeah.
hundreds of people on a set, maybe thousands of people these
Yeah.
days. If
That's
you're
a
making
great
a lot.
metaphor for like any company who's looking to do something, to grow or to launch or do something. What's important is that everyone at the company knows what movie they're making. I love that. You should probably add that. That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and
So
and what you just said is like what's the secret sauce, or what's the seed that everyone needs to know, and it's you need to know that your failure points. At Butchershop, we do this internally for ourselves once a year with our leadership team. What's going to cause Butchershop to fail? And we've gotten crazy things on that list. It's not just like revenue and employee happiness. It's like somebody dies. There's an economic downturn that gets us trapped in San Francisco, which literally that came on our list in 2017. And we completely changed the structure of our company, and now we're a global agency with hundreds of people, which back then we were 20 people. So it's not just for like an initiative, like do it for like your company as well. And maybe not speaking the same language or using confusing terminology might be on that list.
and I love that you're mentioning those type of what could happen if um
Yeah.
in mentioning examples like if somebody dies. I mean, if
Yeah.
because you don't talk about these things. These are not topics that you'd
No.
like, hey, coffee shop, hey, what's up if George
Yeah.
dies? Like you don't talk
I'll
about it,
be
right?
I'll be super frank. One of the top items, it wasn't the top item, but it was on the list, was what if our CEO dies? He is a really skilled skier. He like jumps out of helicopters with like avalanche backpacks and skis, and we're like, what if Trevor dies? Like we're all worried for him. He's like a extreme sport person. And he actually took that to heart and created like a succession plan for the company, right? That's really important. Like nobody talks about that, but those are real things. And that was on our list of concerns and those moments just build a lot of trust as well, because it shows that our CEO cares a lot about us and our company to like take that and build an action item around it so that we feel secure, right? It's crazy. Nobody says that.
What were I'm just curious now. What are some of the other like items on the top of the list that you can kind of recall, like just examples, so we people can maybe be creative next time they have such a session.
Yeah. Let's see. One of them was around charitable things. It was really important to us that we, it would affect the butcher shop culture if we didn't have a larger hand in giving back to the community. So we put a lot of programs in place. We created a program called Equity for Equality, which is we added 1% to all of our contracts, which we tell our clients about, and that we gather that 1%. And it goes into a charitable fund that we donate at the end of the year to a charity. And we've raised $500,000 in the last 2 years just by doing that. And we now get to donate. And that's something that butcher shop employees are really, really proud of, because a lot of their effort and their work now gets to go to charitable events as well. So like that was something that was really important for our culture. Diversity inclusion, if we don't sort of change the profile of people at Butcher Shop to incorporate a much more inclusive culture of backgrounds, that's going to cause people to leave. We have a lot of different people there, but we need to be able to to put programs in place to give other people opportunities there. That was one. And then, like I just said, the one about the economic downturn, that was a serious one. I think that one scored like a 50, that there's a recession or like a catastrophic world event that traps us in San Francisco. and we therefore lose business because most of our clients back then were in the Bay Area. So we changed that. We were like, that's actually a really scary thought. And that happened before, obviously, the pandemic. This was in 2017. And we started to get really strategic about our planning and who we're speaking to outside of the US, working with companies in Europe and Tel Aviv and in the UK. So that was a big strategy for us, was to understand that we could fail if we don't branch out to the type of companies that we're working with and helping. Yeah. Those are some, and I think those are all really, really representative of like the strength of the beat failure methodology, because there's pieces to the business strategy that come up. There's pieces to the culture that's really important, right? People are so important to our companies, right? We can't do anything without our people, right? So it was really important to us to be able to activate a lot of those concerns. And over the last few years, I think 2 years ago, we were ranked one of the top agencies, or one of the top companies to work for. And that's because we put all of those initiatives into gear that made people feel a sense of pride and joy to work at Butchershop outside of just the work that we're delivering to our customers.
Love it. And
Yeah.
I think since you mentioned economic crisis, like there's so much uncertainty these days. And I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the news, if you look at the analysis of people, there could be some very dark analysis of what's happening and what's coming,
Yeah.
right? People are afraid, fear is taking over slowly on a global basis. Nobody knows when, you know, the consequences of this upcoming crisis are going to hit, if there is a crisis, but everybody thinks
Yeah.
there is going to be a big one. But I think maybe if we look into this, and how would you use this tool when you are trying to plan around an upcoming crisis? Let's assume that
Yeah.
there is a global crisis coming. So would you recommend using this tool in a specific way, or how would you use that to crisis plan?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard one because you can only control what you can control, right? And in the last year or so, I also host these beat failure workshops. I'll come into companies and they'll bring their leadership team together, and then I'll actually facilitate this workshop for them. So if anyone wants me to come do that, please let me know. Because sometimes it's nice to have a neutral facilitator so everyone can really just focus on participating. And very often there's a list of external factors, right? Like the war, like the pandemic, like inflation, which is reducing budgets, right? Those are external factors that, how are we supposed to rank those on a scale of likelihood to impact, right? Likelihood is high and impact is high. How do we create an action item to prevent those things from happening? Well, those are external factors. We can't. But you want to focus on what you can control. So go into the other top ranked items and try to create action plans to prevent the things that you can prevent from happening, right? While keeping those external factors in mind on how they're going to impact those other top ranked items. But it's a tough one. Full transparency. Everyone's dealing with that right now, and nobody has the perfect answer for it. But those things will still show up as failure points because they're real and they should show up. They should be on the board. But maybe there are things you can do to pivot or adjust or tweak strategies in order to just soften the blow if those things were to truly come to fruition and really hurt your company.
Yeah, and that's what I see. The value of that is that you identify what are the potential risks or failures, and they might not be, uh, like might be an external event that's happening that you cannot control, but you can
Yeah.
control the way you change your strategy. Let's say this market is going to be hit. I'm just reading a book called Hot Seat by
Mm-hmm.
the former CEO of GE, and it's all about crisis management and how do
Mm-hmm.
you lead in times of crisis. And
Yeah.
at some point they had a huge, they work a lot with the airline industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there's 9/11. You got a point as a CEO, there's 9/11, right? Now all of a sudden the huge part of their clientele, of their clients, is being affected by this crisis nobody expected, right? So but you still can identifying what could be some industry that gets hit, for example, can give you
Mhm.
a hint of how can we change our strategies in resource management so we can be best prepared for the upcoming whatever it is, right? So
Yeah,
so I can
yeah,
I can definitely see the value of the two in that perspective by identifying what could be these risks and failures.
yep, exactly. Yeah,
Amazing, but let's get
yeah.
more positive, right? Like, hey, crisis crisis might happen, might not happen.
Yeah.
Obviously we need to be
Yeah.
well prepared
I
for
actually I
what's to
just thought
come.
of I actually just thought of one more as well when you were asking what some of those were. And I think speaking to the like, okay, well, we can't manage external factors, but what we can manage is how the people at our company work, right? Or we can manage the factors internally at our company. And so one of our other top ranked items was um, people don't have the flexibility to be creative. And that's one of the things that is really missing at a lot of companies, right? You have sort of like productivity, you're planning, you're working, right? But there isn't really very often a certain set of time set aside where there's no pressure, no meetings, and you can just throw things up on the wall, right? You can just be innovative. And so that was one of our top ranked items as well. Obviously, we're a creative company. We have strategists, designers, writers, but many engineers, software developers, front end developers, UX designers. We have such a broad type of creative people. And we really needed to set time aside for them to be able to just riff and have fun, right? So we actually created a type of guideline around how people can split up their time for work, which is play, plan, and produce. So we sort of came up with our own P's in that sense. And so we want to let people, when we're doing meetings, we sort of write in our agenda, okay, is this a play meeting? Or are we just playing, right? It could be in the context of a project or something specific, right? Or a website. Look, we just want to play. I don't want to like get too deep on the details. We just need to come up with something great. Let's just have a play session, right? Or is there a plan session? Are we planning on how to do something? Are we planning on preventing this failure? Are we planning on this meeting? Or are we producing? Are we heads down getting work done? And so we created those 3 buckets at Butchershop to help give people that space to do things. And I think that ties into this whole conversation that we're having and external factors as well, because that's something you can control, right? And you can control the way your people feel at work and give them the space to be creative and come up with new ideas. And I think that's a really interesting one that people could probably try. They should take that and try it because it's been really cool.
I really love it because sometimes it's connected to the whole let's say the intention for what a meeting should be, so everybody's making the same movie, right? Like, are we
Yeah.
playing, are we planning, are we producing? I'm definitely going to try this with my
Yeah.
team, and I'm sure many people will give it a try. um, and since we're talking about productivity, I'm actually curious to look into, by the way, what you said is completely right. Like, I've worked with creative agencies as well, consulting them, and more often than not, somebody will come and say, I don't have time for planning, man. I don't have
Yeah.
space. We have, you said I have 6 jobs, right? Like, I
Yeah.
have so much stuff to do that I'm done, and that's it. I don't have time to organize and plan. And we always have this discussion. It's like, well, you have to, like, if you don't create space, that you're not operation, you don't do things, you don't make decisions, you don't brainstorm, you're just
Mhm.
there with yourself, you reflect, you observe, you check all the projects and you see the progress, you assess, you think about what are the most important objectives and
Yeah.
outcomes for the next day.
Yeah.
What should I say no to? What should I delegate? Like, there's many systems, but you gotta create this space. It
Yeah.
has to be this is me time in the company context.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to anybody, I'm not doing anything, I'm just planning.
And the topic of play can be connected with professional development. Right now, for us, we're very heavy in the digital space. We work with a lot of tech companies. We need to be experts at the forefront of this new metaverse world, right? So during that playtime, people are reading, they're learning about NFTs, about minting, about, right, smart contracts, and the metaverse and all these things. And we've already built a profile of crypto clients. We've already built a crypto exchange platform for our clients. Like, we are focusing not only at being at the forefront of working for customers who are trying to navigate this like new Web3 world that's super confusing, but it's so in its infancy right now that we are taking the time to learn about it too. You can just watch videos or read a book. And that's, for loads of companies, actually going to be a really interesting topic that's coming up, is what's their presence sort of in this metaverse world, and how can they integrate that into their business. And so I think that's also an important part of the play thing, is keeping up with trends, keeping up with new innovative things that are emerging. And I think everyone, it doesn't matter what company you work for, that's really important to be a part of, because things are just moving so fast.
Definitely. I used to live very close to the headquarters of Lego in
Ooh,
Denmark for 8 years actually,
cool.
and my former business partner, he was all about play. He was producing video games and working with creating books for kids, and he was all about play. And I think I had a few other more creative type of guests on the show as well. And I'm a former movie producer. I think that's so productive if we create
Mhm.
environments where actually play is encouraged. And there's multiple examples of how you can do that and design such a culture, but actually allowing employees to have space to play. And play means creativity often. Like, you can just, hey, just 2 hours, just go do stuff. Like, um, very great founder Ilma Nausedaite Tiki. She's a co-founder of a company called MailerLite. Many people maybe heard about it. They just got an exit earlier this year, I think 80, 90 mil. Um, but what they do, they're all about culture, people, play. And one of the things that they had as a company strategy is every quarter you're allowed to take a day off, but it's not a day off, but it's a creativity day, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you go to an art museum, or you go to a playground, you skateboard, whatever, right? you,
Yeah.
you choose what you do, but what you gotta do is you gotta share on the Slack channel. Hey guys, I went there, I played with these balloons, and it was a lot of fun. Here's some pictures. And then you come back and you have some new ideas, right?
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be like a full day, or it could be like something else, but can we actually design culture where play is allowed in a very strategic manner? Like, we can't play
Yeah.
all the time. We got to get things done, but we also
Yeah.
have to play. And
Yeah.
and the other part, and this is, can we incorporate humor and play in the things that we do? Right? We're having a podcast now, and before the podcast, you were like, can I be casual? Can I crack jokes? Can I be like, of course, what, that's what we do it, drinking coffee, we're having fun.
Yeah.
So work is most of your life, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're working more than anything else, probably in your waking
Yep.
hours, for the
Yep.
most of us.
Yeah.
So why not make it fun?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's always important for me too, is like being able to work with people who make me laugh and can crack jokes. Like, I need sort of comedic relief constantly. It's like constant. And I just think it's so important just to like take a break and be able to do self-reflection and professional development, because that's going to ultimately lead to happier employees, which is going to lead to better services or products or things like that. And beat failure isn't just a method, right? The way I've been sort of talking about it this whole time is in sort of a workshop meeting type of form, but there's ways that you can incorporate it and weave it into your company without making it a sort of a formatable workshop. So we incorporate it into the way that we do business development with our customers, so that we vet their thinking and that they're the type of people we want to work with. We tell them like, hey, beat failure is at our core. We want to talk about what your failure points are. We talk them through why we think it's so important, and we can just have a conversation about it. And then we take those failure points from our customers and we actually put them into our contracts, and we map out the solutions we're going to deliver to prevent those things from happening. And that builds so much trust up front with them, right? And then we do it internally with our teams as well. And so we thread it throughout in small ways that's affected the way we do our business development, the way we speak to our customers, the way we build trust amongst our employees. And by consistently doing that, we've grown from a 25 person to, through our connected partner network globally, we're almost at 500 people now. And every single person is thinking this way and keeping that sort of failure topic at mind, even in small things. If we have a designer who's designing a logo, right? That's just a small piece of something, but they're thinking, what's going to cause this design to fail? What's going to cause this logo to fail? Well, it can't look like this, right? It needs to take into account the things my customer told me, right? So even in small ways like that, it can show up and really generate a lot of growth internally and externally for your company. And so I think I hope people who join or listen to this sort of take that to heart. And of course, if they have any other questions or want to learn more about it, then they can always reach out to me. We love talking about this. We do it all the time. Our CEO, Trevor, is also on loads of podcasts, and we do lots of keynotes. And this isn't our secret sauce. We share it. We tell everybody about it because they should use it.
And we spoke a lot about pre-mortems and pre-planning what could make things fail and how do we address it most appropriately. But let's maybe to kind of wrap up, think about a little bit also when failure actually happens, because it does. And actually it happens a lot more than we would like to talk about on LinkedIn and Instagram. Everybody makes mistakes. Every company makes lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
So when things don't go by plan, when mistakes happen, when something really unexpected is happening, how do we accept it in the best possible way? We talk about play, humor, and those kind of things. Do you have your own tools and strategies of accepting failure and addressing it appropriately once it actually happens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's hard for people to want to ever like accept failure or confront it, but we like to sort of view it as like, it sounds cheesy, but failure is actually your friend. Like, make it your friend in a way. Like, you can learn from it. There are ways to prevent it. If you've done everything you can to prevent it, then you can continue learning from it from there, right? Everyone's going to fail. There's all these tripwires. What we want to try to do sort of with this methodology is to prevent those really big catastrophic failures that have really high impact on your budget or your company or your people, right? We're going to fail along the way in different ways, and that's okay, as long as we have identified what the main highest ranked failure items are and we prevent those from happening. Then that's okay that there's going to be other failures along the way, right? There's different sizes of failures. And so creating that mindset and that process of just believing that a lack of clarity breeds drama. And the opposite of success isn't failure, it's clarity, right? We want to have absolute clarity in everything that we do. And that's what this is really designed around. And so if you focus on, okay, well, you could map every single failure point to a lack of clarity, right? If you failed on something, it's because there was something you didn't know, or you didn't understand, or you didn't prevent from happening. And so by creating a space where you can talk about that with your employees, or even just write it down on a piece of paper, that's going to allow you to have a better relationship with failure, because you're going to be understanding where it's coming from and in a healthier way.
This is so powerful. The opposite of success is lack of clarity.
It's true.
when people are not making the same movie, when not everybody's on the same page, but it comes down with first you being clear what you're after or what things are. So
Yep.
so good, so good. And
Yeah.
we were discussing with you, Nina, before we started this whole concept of failure, right? And especially around the younger ones, the generation now. Like, you were like, I'm so happy that we didn't have all these kind of social medias when I was growing up, because it's probably so hard on the people who are like right now, 18, 19, 20 years old. And I just shared with you, I was on 2 different leadership boot camps for people in that age group, very ambitious people doing lots of things. And still I can sense many of them would have this, how to say, pressure, right? The expectations
Yeah.
on the society, their parents, their peer group, and like the
The
social media,
anxiety,
everybody's doing great, right? But it's
yeah,
not really
the
the real
level
picture.
of anxiety for young individuals who are sort of breaking into the working world now is skyrocketed because they're just freaking out. The competition is super high, right? It's really difficult to get jobs straight out of college, right? So their level of anxiousness is up there. So I think it's great that
And
you're
what if I
working
get
with them.
and what if I get the wrong job? What if it's not the perfect one? And
Yeah.
I played one video. I think I don't remember the guy, but I saw it on the Rich Roll podcast, and it was like, that's it. I gotta play them this video.
Yeah.
And the video was a guy was talking about if you're in your 20s, you gotta see your 20s as a workshop stage. Go try this new
Yeah.
thing. Go
Yeah.
see, this risky job. And maybe 9 out of 10 of the things that you're going to start are going to not work out.
Yeah.
But that's not the
Yeah.
point. It's a workshop stage. This is
Yeah.
when you grow as a professional, as a human being. So I hope more people out in this age group actually
Yeah.
listening and can let go a little bit of the pressure, because that's
Yeah.
also how we create amazing cultures in organizations, right? When we aim for the best, we create clarity, we create productivity driven organizations, but we also, when you want to move fast, the likelihood of making mistakes is also going to increase. And if
Mm-hmm.
people are doing their best and they're like, I want to try this blue button, okay, you have all the data, you prepared well, let's try the blue button doesn't
Yeah.
work, good, cool, now we know it doesn't work, let's move, right? So
Yeah.
speed, but also allowing space for experimentation.
Yeah. I think one of the perspectives that's also, I think, younger generations, or the younger generation doesn't really think about is it's not always what you're working for, right? It's who you're working with. And I've heard C-level executives at Fortune 500 companies in Silicon Valley tell me that they do not care about their product. They care about their people. Right. And when you hear someone say that, you're like, what do you mean? You're a product company, right? And they go, I don't care about the product. If I take care of my people, the product is going to shine. Right. So I think putting less emphasis on like what you're working for and who you're working with and the type of people you're surrounding yourself with is going to help you so much in your professional growth and development. I never thought I didn't apply to CV Couleur, my first job, because I wanted to work in product marketing. Like I didn't know, right? But I worked with people who brought me into different things and taught me different methods and brought me to another team, which then brought me to this thing, right? I followed the people train and surrounded myself with smart people who I could learn from. And that's what's going to help guide you. It doesn't matter right now that I worked at a photo printing company, right? It doesn't matter. It matters who I worked with, and those people are who helped me get to where I am today. So I think that's something that a lot of people forget about.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on top of that, because this is brilliant, and again, many people listening probably in your 20s now, first steps professionally after university, after college, and even if you're in college or in high school, one thing I personally was intuitively really good about was going out and doing work for free for organizations, for people that I wanted to learn from. Right, I was a finance guy studying finance. I wanted to be a movie director and producer. So I would make coffee, salads, like whatever it is. But I want to be on set. How can I help you? And I'm finishing my master's degree, right? Who cares? I can make coffee, but I'll be
Yeah.
around the directors and producers, and I'll be just watching them and the storyboards and all the stuff. So if you are out there right now and you're like, I don't know how to get a job, I don't have experience, go get experience. Go and say, hey, you know what? I have 5-10 hours a week. Who are the people in town or virtually, I mean, we live in a virtual world, that I want to be like? You want to be a photographer, okay, who's a great photographer? Can you go and change their batteries and do some editing of the picture?
Yeah.
I don't know, but just be around the people. Give away some time for free if you have to go find a part-time job so you can afford to do it. But this is the fastest way to succeed.
Yeah, remove the ego, right? It doesn't matter. You want to learn, you want to shadow. It doesn't matter sometimes what you're doing. I watered the plants for 4 years at my last agency, because we needed a plant waterer, and nobody wanted to do it because it's like, that's a stupid job. I'm not going to be seen watering the plants in the office. Well, I was managing multiple people there and I was watering the plants. Like, I don't care. Remove the ego, just be helpful. And that's Butchershop's ethos, is we always come from a place of being helpful. We're in the creative agency. We're not saving lives, but we want to be as helpful as we can to the people we work with. We want to be as helpful as we can to our clients to make them look like the heroes and to shine. And so we're always looking for those small moments of just being helpful. And anytime we're stuck, we're like, what would be the helpful thing to do right now? You know, without aside who's responsible for what all the time, let's get rid of the racy for a minute. What's going to help the situation? And let's do it that way. And so that's how I also looked at it when I was younger as well. I was the intern who got all the coffee, but I think nowadays people aren't doing that anymore. They don't make interns get coffee, but I didn't care because people needed coffee and I was happy to get it because I wanted to be helpful. Just
Ladies
like
and
with your,
gentlemen,
changing the batteries for the photographer or getting
ladies
coffee
and
for the
gentlemen, Nina Mueller, the plant waterer at Butchershop, here with
I
us
love
today.
plants. They're so important to energy in the room. I have so many plants here in my house.
Love it, love it. Nina, it's such a pleasure having you. I'm definitely going to have you back at some point because there's so much topics we can keep on
It was so
exploring. And
fun. Thanks for having me. I
thanks for being
appreciate
here. And
it.
final. I'm sure many people listening right now, they're like, how do I get in touch with Nina? How do we get in touch with Butchershop, Prio? Like, could you give us a quick overview of, how could people connect with you? And if
Yeah.
there's companies that want to maybe involve you guys to help them out, what can they do? What are the kind of products and everything?
Yeah. Well, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, Nina Mueller, Butchershop. I'm happy to talk to anybody about beet failure. If they want to learn more about Butchershop, if you're a company who's looking to enter a new market, right? If you're trying to expand to the US or you're expanding to Europe, or if maybe you're launching a very specific initiative just in your region as well, we have global expertise at a global scale, but also local expertise. So we can help people and we can really be your partner in these really important inflection points for your business. And you'll definitely hear us talk about beet failure. We definitely eat our own dog food when it comes to this topic. If you're unsure and you just want to chat and you feel like we could maybe do something together, or you just want to learn more, I'm always happy to continue the conversation. I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. So just reach out.
Yeah, so I've seen Nina speak. She's an exceptional speaker. As you can see, it's not just blah blah, fluffy stuff. It's actually very well designed methodology, lots of experience. So I can not recommend her anymore. And as a bonus, of course, if you have any plants, they will definitely be watered after this session that Nina is
Yeah.
gonna give to you. So hey, what's
Also,
not to like?
lastly, I totally forgot, we digitized our own tool so that in this virtual world, we can host beet failure workshops in our tool called prio.com.
Boom.
If anybody wants to try it out, I'm happy to give everyone just a free coupon code to give it a try. So just write me on LinkedIn and you can use our digital tool to host your own beet failure workshop.
She promised, and now we're gonna request. I'm definitely gonna reach out right after the podcast, Nina. So I
Do
want
it.
to check out the two. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks everybody for joining. Ibrahim, thank you for being with us. Our friend based in Estonia, but from Nigeria, he's saying failure is your friend. Bravo. Yes, it is. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us more than an hour and for listening to Productivity Master episode 119, close to 120 episodes. Thank you, Corona, for the
Wow.
opportunity. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure to check it out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And if you really, really like us, you can also leave us a review so we can reach even more people with the message of people like Nina. So grateful to having you here, Nina, and
Thank
look forward
you.
to seeing you soon somewhere across Europe.
I'll see you soon. Thank you.